This is A State of Control, the monthly podcast put on to you by the fine folks at Aviation. My name is Tim Albright. Welcome. This is the December episode. A bunch of us are kind of gearing down and slowing down. It's the week of Christmas. One person who is not is Rich Fregosa because the man doesn't know how to say no to clients. He's that darn good. How are you, sir?
Good. Mellow West Coast Christmas greetings. So mellow. Yeah, we're trying. Yeah, normally we try to shut down. This year, I'm just gonna say that I'm just hoping that it just means things are turning around, so that people made us offers we couldn't refuse. So
according to a recent report, the what was it? The U.S. economy grew at a higher rate than it has in the last 11 years. So it may be turning around, dude.
We'll take it.
All right. Not what we're talking about on this episode, but hey, we'll hit it again. Also with us is David Barnett from the Sextant Group. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Good. I told David, if you're watching the video, he's the most bearded consultant I've ever met in my life. So it's a very impressive follicles there. And last but not least, the host and producer of this episode and every other one is Steve Greenblatt from Control Concepts. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Great to be on, and great to be back for another interesting episode.
This will be very interesting. Okay, so here, I'll just put it out there. This episode is about code. So, similar to last episode where we talked about modules and, this, that, and if you're not a programmer, you may not want to listen to this one. It may bore the heck out of you. Although if you're a consultant or even someone who hires programmers, you may want to stick around. We're going to talk about the value of well-written code and whether or not it matters. I'm going to start this out though by relaying a story. Right. Early on in my programming days, I had written a couple programs and they worked. They're functional. They get from point A to point B. You push a button. Something happens, right? That's kind of the whole idea behind control. You push a button, something happens. You walk in a row, into a room, something happens. And I was, the people that I was working with, they had to take my code and do some stuff with it, and they had some questions. And granted, it wasn't the most eloquent code in the world, but again, it worked. And so I was talking with one of the program manufacturers, and I asked them a question. I said, should I be doing this or this or this, and nomenclatures and this, that, and the other. And they responded by asking me a question back. They said, does it work? And I said, well, yeah, it works. Well, then it doesn't matter, does it? It's as long as it works. And that was great for my first couple of years of control programming. But as I have been growing older in this and learning from people like Rich and Steve, yes, there is value to well-written code. Yes, there is value to having a standard nomenclature, at least within your business, right? Making sure that people can read and understand your code. Mr. Fregosa has said famously, to me at least, if you can't pick it up 6 months later and read it, then you did something wrong. Right, because even as the original author of the code, you may, you in 6 months or a year when you pick the same code that you wrote up, it's not going to be the same, right? You're not going to remember it. So, Rich, actually, we're going to kick it off with you on this. And the great question from Steve: is all source code created equal?
No.
There we go. Never mind. End of story.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for coming. That's our show.
Why though? Why is not? I mean, why does the statement, does it work, not work?
It comes down to, first you need to think about your market. If you are sticking with commercial or residential or anything, the first thing that you always have to bring into account is scalability and flexibility. There's two approaches that you can take. You can create kind of a one-off, which is you can call it purpose-driven code, what you were talking about, right? I need it to work. I need to do X, Y, and Z. And if you're contracted for X, Y, and Z, and that's all that's in your budget for X, Y, and Z, well then yes, that's pretty much as far as you can take it. But as a company, the goal is to be able to take what you did for X, Y, and Z, and then be able to use it to propel yourself forward, and it's experience at that point. And if you are efficient, or at least you're forward-thinking enough, you can learn everything that you've done from the prior project, lay it into the new one, and give yourself the flexibility so that when you do get, like I was talking about, a call 6 months, a year, 5 years, or in my case, I've had calls 15 years later, where technology's changed, there's upgrades, there's things that are going on. The client has paid for code at that point, or an operating system, and hopefully your goal is, in order to be able to support them, is to be able to come in economically at some point. I mean, you don't want to have to charge somebody for custom development every single time. I mean, you're going to price yourself out in some instances. So, where does Elegant Code give you the ability? It's a competitive advantage. The more that you can position your code so that it is flexible enough to kind of drop in different programs, you're able to get in, get out, and get paid. And really, that's what we look at is, how can you get paid not only on this one, but how can you find a way to get leveraged? Can you leverage yourself to get paid on the next one without, absolutely hemorrhaging development time on it?
Okay, you said something there. I want you to clarify for me, because if there are people out there that are just starting in this, or, you said it helps you be more profitable. How so?
Well, whenever you're starting out, you've got this kind of delta, this formula that's occurring, and when you're starting out, you're really peaked up on your what we call NRE, non-recurring engineering costs, right? Your development costs. So you are just burning time, and as you're learning, that you can't necessarily pass on to your client. We'd love to. I mean, hell, subsidized projects are
Yes.
awesome, but those are few and far between. So you're going to be spending time as you're learning on the front end, figuring it out. And the goal is, as you're figuring it out over the course of the life of the project, however you're putting this program together, you can amortize it over time. So if you've got, as an example, one of the manufacturers has been promising to come out with this TV preset program, right? It was supposed to be really simple and integrated and whole thing. After X amount of months, we got tired of it and just said, we're just going to write our own. And so we took that time, put all of our efforts into that, but knowing that for the first client we sell it to, we can't charge them the full amount of our development costs. We knew that we have to be able to spread it out over the life of the projects going forward over the next few years. So when you're starting out and you're a young company or you're a young programmer, I mean, you're not as efficient. You're not going to be able to get as much done quickly because you just don't have kind of the landscape to be able to take it all in. So profitability comes from experience. Experience comes from doing the code. That comes from doing it right, and it becomes this cycle. As you get better, as you streamline, as you find ways to do it better, quicker, faster, you're going to make more money, hopefully. And really, you should always be looking. You should always be asking your question: how can I use this elsewhere? Whenever you're starting something new, what's your market? Or if you're in educational, if you're in commercial, if you're in boardrooms, if you're in residential, you should constantly be asking yourself, how can I use this? And more often, what can I take out? What don't I need? And really, for younger programmers, that's really the key is learning subtlety and elegance in your code, not what you put in, but what you leave out. And trying to keep it as compact and as nimble as possible.
Okay. All right, Steve, from your perspective and your standpoint, why does it matter? Why does keeping this code clean and making sure that all the nomenclatures are the same, or at least similar? To Rich's point, is that really what makes you more profitable in the long run?
Yes, that. Absolutely the case, and there's a couple of different ways you could look at it. From a developer's perspective, I think the being scalable, being forward-thinking, being able to accommodate changes, all those things are really a necessity in order to be effective, because what we do is never done. It's living, growing. I learned that when I first started this, and I never quite understood what that meant until many years later, as we got into bigger projects and as we had to build on a foundation. I think when you're working in a team, it also is important to have a style and be able to make that style something that's understandable. And whether it's commenting, whether it's naming of variables, whether it's the structure that you use, agree upon some way of doing it so that everybody on your team, if they had to troubleshoot your code or needed to step in, or if you're collaborating, there is some way that it can be transferred. But we can go on to even talk about different programming techniques that may be better than others too. And sometimes I've certainly been caught in situations where I've worked on a project in a time crunch, reused something that I had done already, and didn't do a good job of cleaning it up. And when you go back and look at it, although it may be your style and it may be something you can get back to, you start to see dead ends, or you start to start troubleshooting something that really doesn't apply to this project. So one of the things that I would definitely echo is that having clean code is important, but I think we all fall into the trap that isn't always practical, I guess is the right word, but the bigger the project and the more you're working on multiple rooms and so forth, I think you really need to start with a good foundation.
Okay. David, we're going to bring you in from the consultant side because obviously consultants, a lot of times, you are the people who drive what programmers see. You are the authors that we take and we create things out of what you say. As a consultant, how do you make certain, how do you write in your language on the specs to make sure that the code is well written, or at least it's well written, it's understandable from someone other than the original programmer?
All right, so, there are a few approaches we take for that, but I will answer the question. I just want to jump back on a couple of things that have been mentioned. Right off the bat, sorry, I have to disagree with your opening statement of that really only programmers should care about this, and that if you're an end user or a consultant or whoever, then it doesn't really matter. I think that's an unfortunate belief in the industry, and I think we actually need to move away from that and get end users to recognize the value of well-written code. I think when you know what you're getting and you're getting quality and you can see it, I think that inspires confidence. Everyone has horror stories about poorly written code and the headaches it's caused, and I think by being able to demonstrate this as a selling point for you guys or for us, it gives confidence because, and this ties in with the profitability question also, because so much time is spent at the end of projects after everything's done getting it to work. And if you put in a little bit more time up front into the development cycle and you understand everything and you code it properly, whatever definition we're using, which is again a different discussion. I'll let you guys worry about that. That's so much we don't so much care about. But in terms of knowing that you're getting the quality, high quality code properly written, by industry best practices, whatever, that is so critical on cutting down that end time and that debugging time and having the confidence when you walk into a room that the system's going to do what it needs to do. So when you look at code, what are we trying to do? Obviously, functionality is the first and most important thing. Does it work? But that's a necessary condition, but I would say that's not a sufficient condition. We need it to be flexible, as Steve mentioned. We need it to be reliable. It has to be maintainable and debuggable. Not that that's a word, but
it's a word.
But it's an important feature of any code. And if we look at the AV industry and where we do code compared to modern software engineering out in the rest of the world, software engineering started with like we started, just guys hacking away in their basement, drinking Diet Coke or whatever, and it's now a real industry, and there are real rules and there are ways to do code properly, and I think we need to adopt that. So that brings me to finally, in a circuitous way, to answer your actual question. So what do? We can make sure that, first of all, the programmers are certified to do the job. Again, AV, and I think I said this last time I was on the show, it's very kind of loose about definitions. Who's an engineer, who's a programmer, what qualifications do you need, if any. So the first thing we do is make sure that whatever product it is, whether it's Crestron, AMX, or whatever, that you've got the proper manufacturer certifications, that they're current. I'm an AMX ACE programmer, a Crestron certified programmer, but from 2003. So is that relevant today? Probably not, or maybe not enough in many cases. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, and this is again critical, and where the role of the consultant really comes in, is to understand what the needs of the clients are, both the end users, the institution, the organization, whether it's an enterprise or a school or a campus, getting what they want and what they expect, aligning the expectations of how far do we need to go with this, and then making sure that that's all well documented and then agreed and kind of well understood by everyone involved, and that way there's no surprises. The other thing we do is we set up a process in the specifications to make sure that it's not a surprise. So everything, there's a submittal process, things get reviewed, things get discussed, things get changed. So by the time you actually wheel the racks into the site, everything's already been decided, and at that point it's really just a question of just implementing what's already been determined way in advance.
Yeah. And actually, to your point about the certification is, I'm Crestron certified, but from 2000. AMX, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong on this. To maintain your ACE, you have to have so many classes a year. And Crestron here recently, in the last 6 months, is starting to implement that very same program where, yes, you're Crestron certified, and then obviously the master classes you go to, you silver and gold and all that stuff. But they're putting into place practices where if you don't maintain a certain level of education through the Crestron classes, you lose the certification as well. So both of those companies, or at least those two companies, I'm not familiar with Control4 and Aurora's certifications, but those two companies are at least putting into place mechanisms that at least you have some level of confidence that
you're not certified for life.
yeah, exactly.
Like most certifications, you have to keep it up to date.
Yeah, I mean, even the CTS, right? You have every 3 years you have to have so many. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I said, I think to David's point too, one of the things that would be a good complement to those certifications that they don't necessarily go into are best practices and software development. Because I'll even say, as the owner of a software company, we don't necessarily have set guidelines of best practices that are adopted in what we do, and I think it could be something of value, and I think could be something that we could learn as a way of bringing in some knowledge into what we do. It's probably not going to be taught by manufacturers, though.
Okay, so let's bring that in, though. I mean, is there, Steve, is there a standard that and I know what people are going to say about standards. We have to, we probably do. But is there a standard that we can put in place, or at least adopt, that says, you know what, this is what good code looks like, right? This is what good code feels like. Maybe it's there's so many button presses where the dashboard for control, right? Document that Infocom put together 10 years ago now said that there shouldn't be any more than 3 button presses, right? And you have to get to any one thing. Steve, is there a way that we can say, this is what good code looks like, or maybe not? But can you tell me what you think good code looks like?
I think that we could certainly come up with something, whether it's specific to our industry or we go outside and borrow something in terms of if it's line code. I think that there's probably a lot of references that we can go and look at, whether it's something's taught in a university or something that we can get as maybe an association or a programmers group standard or guideline, but I think that would make life a lot better for an end user, quite honestly, because then they wouldn't have to worry about who do they go to write the code, and is it going to be code that they can live with, and something that they're going to be able to go to somebody else if they needed to, and that person's going, or company is going to be able to help them. I think that from this conversation changes quite a bit when we start looking at it from the customer's perspective. They don't necessarily understand all of what we do other than making the system work, or maybe they have some experience, but they don't necessarily know what it is that they're buying. And I was trying to think of a good analogy, but maybe the difference between solid furniture that's made of wood or something that's made of pressed board that you put together. They both are furniture, but and solve the same need, but they're quite different in their makeup and their durability and so forth.
Actually, I want to get back to that in a second, but I want to bring Rich in and ask him the same question. Rich, what does good code look like? I mean, to you, and I will say this: Rich has helped me out, and Steve has helped me out a lot, in my learning process, and more than one occasion, Rich and I have team viewered together, and he's shown me some of his code, to which my eyeballs melt and my brain explodes, because there's a different file structure in residential than there is in commercial. And the reason I say that is a lot of times you have one processor or one main program, and one specifically that the first time that Rich and I connected on this, there are several, there are folders within folders within folders within folders, and it makes sense, right? Because you've got several different rooms and this, that, and the other. In commercial, 9 times out of 10, you're writing one program for one room, right? You don't have to have that many layers of nesting, to steal a phrase. So, Rich, from your standpoint, what does good code look like?
Well, honestly, I think that good code, whether it's residential or commercial, any of them, it's good code has structure. It has an understandable, repeatable structure. More than anything else right now in the current climate that we're seeing, good code allows you to actually sell it as a value-added service as opposed to the free code that's being handed out by the manufacturer.
Okay.
Again, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Steve and David and I mean, we all started in 90s, or even before that. It was far more of it was a much smaller club of control systems programmers at the time. It was extremely specialized. We were using tools that we were making it up as we went along. And so at that point, the programmer fit a very specific need because the manufacturer wasn't necessarily providing the tools, and we didn't have the technology to push it out yet. Fast forward to now, and I said it a couple of times on several shows, from a business standpoint, if you are not actively looking how to write good code as a software developer, not as a programmer module put it togetherer, you're not going to be in business long.
Yeah.
And more so than ever, even if you're a one-man shop or if you got 10, 15 coders in there, even if you're an integrator with programmers on staff, you need to start, and David pointed it out exactly, which was there are rules. There are software development rules, and they are established rules. And the manufacturers that we're working with are actually, although they're not using the software development tools that are currently out there for the rest of the technology sector, they're trying to bridge the gap. They're giving us interim tools that bridge it from their compiled machine level code to a JavaScript enabler or anything that's out there, command line code that happens to be out there. And so that progression is happening, and sooner or later we're going to hit that. There will be a tipping point where they just, in order to survive, we're going to have to work more like the rest of the existing technology world that's out there. But from a standpoint of what does good code look like? Good code is what makes you money today, what makes you money tomorrow, and it comes from looking at the existing successful infrastructures that are out there and applying those models to yourself. With residential, we've had a way of doing it for years and years and years and years, but that was based on a very specific set of software tools that we were given. Whether it's AMX, Crestron, anybody that's out there. But now you look, there's a whole lot of different players, and a lot of them are, it's kind of picking from a menu. Even the manufacturers that we have now, right? You buy this processor and you plug in a touch panel, and 6 buttons later, it's auto-configured itself. It's a conference room.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it almost doesn't matter if you're writing, hand coding assembly language or using some advanced drag and drop environment or object oriented or with functions or mainline or whatever it is. There's still rules. There's still a way to do things properly, and it's really, in my mind, on a higher level, independent of the exact language you're using, independent of the design environment, whether it's DOS or Windows or whatever. There's ways to do code, and these are well known. And again, the IT world, the software development, software engineering world. I mean, this is stuff that goes back, decades. My first job out of college was designing control systems for industrial equipment. These are big, 54-inch saw blades. And when you hit that emergency stop button, you needed that thing to stop right then and there, or someone's arm was going to get ripped off. And so there's ways of defining things that are mutually exclusive. So the saw blade can't be on and off at the same time, because that would just make it explode. And there's ways to write code that do things like that. And mission critical environments have lots of rules about testing code. And the AV industry for a long time just rejected all of that. I think we're starting to come around, but not even by choice. It's someone mentioned a few minutes ago about how in the commercial world it's one piece of code or one program per room, and that was true for a number of years, but that's just not the case anymore. We're talking about building-wide integration. We're talking about smart building technology, intelligent building technology, energy management, BMS, scheduling, Fusion asset management, all of these other systems that are tied in. It's a very different type of integration than just pressing play on a touch panel and having the VCR hit play. We're not talking about that anymore, because that's all kind of commoditized now. I mean, you don't really need custom software for that. So I think the environment we're in, we have to take this stuff seriously.
I agree, and I'm with David on it. And one of the things that's happening is that we've had a way of doing things, for 15 years, and we are moving away. We are wholeheartedly embracing the software development tools that are out there that allow us to just toss aside the existing tools that we've had for 20 years. Because, like David was saying, is that it's about looking at something bigger. It's about looking at, you are providing the service. It goes back to integration, true integration, right? You are the conduit between the user and the technology. They don't care. So your job is to get that information relayed in as streamlined a manner as possible. And I'm with David 100%. We've been spoiled. We got to do it our way just because there was nobody else who was going to do it. It's not the case anymore. I mean, just look at any Kickstarter that's out there. We've talked about it. Is that it is no longer a closed loop where we can just say, yeah, well, nobody's going to come in and take over this market. It's too complicated. Nobody wants to do it. That's not the case. Chips are getting cheap, and people are finding ways to operate in the software as a service model. And as we become less and less hardware reliant, good code equals money, equals you're still in business. And from the manufacturer, from the specifier, from the people who are buying it, they're all questioning it. I mean, these are not dumb people who are looking at these contracts and looking at these budgets and are just looking and saying, well, why does it cost this much? Well, because it does, and just go, okay, the end user is becoming so much more technologically savvy that it is the professional responsibility upon anybody who's working on a project to be forward thinking, and like we were just talking about, instead of purpose-driven code, like they would say, it's not about pressing play on a VCR anymore, not even close. It is exactly about that. It is about environmental conditions, power consumption, all of these other things. Who's in the room? From residential, we follow the same rules at that point, and it's what's good code? Like, I think David, I'm going to paraphrase David, is like, don't be lazy. That's what it comes back to. What makes good code? It's not being lazy about it. And a lot of times we get into we got the budget and we got to get this done and the deadline and everything else, but you're always going to have a deadline.
I would also say one thing that adds to it too is really understanding what it is that you're doing and not kind of figuring it out on the way along the way. So if you have a clear understanding and picture, and you're able to define most of the parameters of your project, I think that you're going to end up with better written code rather than going in halfway and figuring out what the client wants, or what the real bits and pieces of the spec are while you're writing your code. And I think that usually ends up in creating a little bit of chaos within the code, because you're not planning. You're writing it as you go, and you're adding stuff and testing it, and you're not able to look at that bigger picture. And I think, unfortunately, we all fall into that pattern at times. But the more that we can define up front, or I think the better chance we have of having code that's going to be more sustainable.
If your code can't be drawn out on a giant whiteboard where you've thought about all of the things, then you're not doing it.
But that part comes first. First you sketch it out. You have your layers. Good code obviously should be modular, and you have different abstractions. So you've got a black box that does the specific things. You define its inputs and outputs. Once you've written that you put to the side, and then you move on to the next thing. What you see so often in poorly written code is when those levels get blurred. And so when you change a VCR model or a projector model, you can't just swap out that module. You now have to change 6 other things. So I'll kind of get back to something that Rich said a couple minutes ago about don't be lazy. I disagree. My whole philosophy about working in general as an engineer is to be as lazy as you possibly can. And how do you be as lazy as you possibly can? You do it right, and you do it once, and then you don't have to revisit it. Because real laziness is you put the planning in, you sketch everything out, you decide what you're doing, and then you do it properly, and you do it, and then you only have to do it once at that point. So
that's being organized. Being lazy is going, oh, let's get the band together.
That's being sloppy. That's being sloppy, which is different.
Okay, now we're parsing. All right, sloppy, organized.
But I think the point's clear, regardless of what you call it. But by putting a little bit of planning up front, you can save yourself a huge amount of hassle on the back end, and I think that ultimately benefits the client, and it benefits the developers too, because you're not squeezed at the end, working until 3 a.m. when they've got a big board meeting the next morning.
Amen, brother.
And also, I think they would say it's being lazy is making sure that you can be proud of your code, but you're not overconfident with your code. You got to be willing to beat yourself up. You got to be willing to just constantly look and saying, I'm doing this wrong. I'm flat out doing this wrong. I can do better, and how do we do it better? A lot of times it's like, well, we got to be done by Tuesday. I've been guilty of it myself. We all have, which is like, yeah, it's done. It's good enough. We'll get it on the next one. But you keep getting it on the next one. You keep getting it on the next one. You never do, and it builds. It steamrolls until you've gotten to this point where it's just like, what just happened to us? And then you're spending all your time trying to finish a job, and you can't because you painted yourself in that corner.
Yeah. Let me bring up something here this show is not anything if not, we're not afraid of controversy, and I'm going to bring up a subject that may or may not step on some toes. We're going to start with David, though, as the consultant, and we'll bring in the programmers at the end here.
David, has about somebody's party not being at Infocom again?
Oh, jeez. You know what? We haven't made fun of Extron in a long time. Actually, did I tell you guys that? No, I'll tell you later. As a consultant, I'll just ask it this way. What are your feelings about using a wizard, right? Because everybody has one. Right, Crestron has one, AMX has one, Extron has one. Yeah, everybody has a wizard, and if you don't know what a wizard is in the control world, it's a standalone program 9 times out of 10, where it's even a step beyond a graphical user, a graphical programming or object-oriented programming. It really is kind of a drag and drop. I have this processor, I have this DVD player, and I have this projector. Kind of what a wizard is, it steps you through the process, and you hit a button at the end, and it creates the code, right? It writes the code for you, and then you upload it to the processor. David, as a consultant, and as someone whose your job is to get the client, good working program and exactly what it is they're looking for, What are your feelings about programmers using wizards?
All right, so I call them configurators. I don't know if that's the technical term for them, but the distinction that I make is between you're configuring something that's within a fixed structure. There's frameworks already there, and you can customize it for the application, but it's not. You're not custom writing code. You're not custom writing the application. You're typically not custom creating the GUI, the user interface, the experience of either using it, operating it, or programming it. You're stuck within that thing. So for simple systems, that may be fine. And I think we talked last time about how if we have a real simple, small meeting room with $5,000 worth of equipment, we don't want to spend $10,000 developing the software to control it.
Yeah.
So in that environment, it makes sense. In a complicated room or complicated system, they tend to not work so well because they're limited, because they've all the choices are built in, and you're just kind of checking the box. Okay, one projector or two, and the functionality there is kind of built in. So if you check 2 projectors, how does the audio work? Does it follow the last? Does it do both? Whatever it is what it is, and you typically can't change it. So that may be okay, that may not. It tends to break down for more complicated systems. These tools have been around for a while. They started coming out at least 10 years ago. And the first ones were quite rudimentary. Obviously, as things progress, they become more and more sophisticated. On the other hand, the systems are becoming more and more sophisticated, as we've been talking about, in terms of what the expectations are and what a modern AV control system needs to interface with. It's really difficult to get all that into a configurator. So I think to answer your question, yes, they do have utility. They do make sense in certain cases, but that has to be really clearly defined. Again, this is from the consultant perspective. It has to be a conscious decision. It has to be something that you have to make sure that the solution matches the application, matches the need of what we're trying to do. Just like every other technology choice that we make, this has to be a conscious choice. It can't be that it goes out and then downstream the programmer decides, oh, you know what, I want to go watch the game, so I'm not going to write a code. I'm just going to use this configure it. That happens sometimes, and that I think is a mistake. But like any tool, it's got its place. It's got to be used appropriately.
Okay. Mr. Greenblatt, from your standpoint, what are your feelings about configure? We'll use David word configurators.
I would agree that it has its place, but one of the things that I would say would be a good rule of thumb is that the system should be small enough that if you needed to, you could start over to reprogram it, because more than likely modifying something like that is probably going to be a lot more complicated. And making changes and being able to do, but once you step out of the boundaries and or the limitations, that's where that solution I think really weakens. But if it's a small enough system, and if it fits the need in terms of a budget, and the client is aware of it, then I think that it is something that's feasible. I mean, I think we'd all love to be able to click a few buttons and press some things and have beautiful code come out that runs our system. But I think in reality, we all know that we have to be able to satisfy what the customer asks for at the day that they're ready to sign off, and be able to make those little changes and customization and something like that. I think it could end up biting you if it isn't explained up front that's the route that's being taken. So in summary, a lot of what I'm saying is consistent with what David's saying as well.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that's where I come from is making sure the client knows and understands that that's what's happening. So, Mr.
We call. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just go.
I was saying, configurator. They're the fast food of automation.
There you go.
No, it's true. I mean, if you think about it, right? If you're shopping from the 99-cent value meal, right? You don't ask how the nuggets are made, and you also don't go in, and you also don't.
It's a pink slime. Haven't you seen Facebook? Yeah. Pink slime.
They don't ask you if you want your cheeseburger medium rare at the fast food restaurant, right? You get the cheeseburger, you get the nugget, and you pay for it, and that's where your expectation is, and that's kind of how we explain at that point, which is, hey, look, everybody's bought fast food. Fast food, it's sustenance. It'll work. It'll get in you. There'll be some nutrients. It's not necessarily what you wanted, but it'll get the job done. And the configurators will do that. There's the menu. Here you go. Pick from this, and you want to supersize that sucker. All right, well, here you go. And you get it, and you get out, and it makes sense. But just like David and Steve were saying, is that as long as the end user is educated to say this is it, there is no special order. At this point, there is no painting outside the lines of this. And if you have decided, and we have agreed, that you are not going to deviate from this, which they'll always go, oh yeah, that's always going to be like that. It never happens, once they've used it, because half the time they've never had a system to work with, so they don't know. There's that saying is that you don't know what you don't know when you're starting out, and that comes from the education standpoint, which is, if after you've fully educated the end user and you've done all of your due diligence and you've made sure that everybody's on board on what the system won't do, and everybody's cool with it, rock on. Get in, get out, get a couple of clicks, and save as. If the goal is to be a technology partner and to be looking after the best interests of the client, if they have growth potential, and again, there's that big qualifiers. There's a big if in there from the qualification standpoint. But if there is going to be a growth pattern or a change, or they may be seeing something coming down the line that's outside of what this thing can do, then it's upon you, to write good competitive code. And we do that. We have a tiered approach with clients, which is, here's something that is going to be comparable to the configurator wizard that you're seeing, that this brand new thing that's splashing and it rhyming with ring. Here's what you got. And yeah, that's cool. Kind of works. Awesome. But chances are you might be used to a little bit more. And here's what we do. And so here's what's comparable to it and fits within this. Or let's show you something cool. And then when people look and see, oh, well, if these are my choices and this actually is closer to what I want, even though I haven't lived with it, then people make educated decisions. I mean, it comes back to, again, it's the configuration tool. If they understand what it does and what it doesn't do, and they can live with it, they're still writing the check. So I'm not going to argue with somebody who's paying me at that point. If I've done everything possible to make sure that they're making an informed decision, and they say, yeah, this is all I need, yeah, I'll let them. It's fine. You move on to the next one. But it's like I said, it's kind of that professional responsibility to make sure, do you understand what you're getting into?
Any color you want, as long as it's black.
I'm sorry?
Any color you want, as long as it's black.
That's exactly it.
Thank you, Henry Ford. Very nice.
And for developers who are starting out, yeah, why is it good? Because you can crack open the code and look at it, and look and see how they've done it, and find ways how to streamline your process, and whatever you feel that you can do better. I mean, because everybody looks at everybody's code and goes, I could do better.
Well, so let me crack on that for a second, because I did that, right? In my first couple years of programming, I couldn't make head or tail. That code was so bloated coming out of a configurator that, maybe it was me, right? But they did, 15 or 16 different, symbol just to do a simple, DVD press or whatever it was at the time. Incredibly bloated. I guess that's where I'm going to disagree with all three of you. I don't think anybody should really ever use a configurator.
But that's the lesson you learned. You learned not to use it.
Very nice. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just saying that, compared to where they were, the ones from 10 years ago that we all, stayed away
and maybe
from,
that's it, yeah.
And avoided like the plague. The modern batch are much better. They're finally to the point where I would say they are usable for certain applications.
Okay.
The old ones were pretty much useless.
Yeah, I haven't done it.
If you had 5 sources, in other words, if you had a choice of up to 6 sources and you only chose 3, it would, they wouldn't even group the buttons together. There would be holes between the buttons. They were very rudimentary, very, very limited what they could do, and they have come a long way. And I think, again, as software develops, as technology develops, they'll continue to get better. But with all the expectations, I think there's still going to be a need for what we all here do.
I'll agree with what Tim said, though. The source code is definitely not something that you want to be getting into. I think you'll probably do yourself, you'll do more harm than good if you start getting into configured written code.
Oh yeah.
No, if it's configured code, you're not touching the code. That's the whole
That's the whole point.
thing.
I mean, one of the selling points, though, early on was the fact that it writes the code, and then you could go in and customize it and modify it, and you probably could, but that's not where you're going to get any efficiency.
No, agreed.
All right. Hey, we agreed on something. Holy cow. I love this show because we hardly ever do that. You know what, guys? That's going to do it for us for this month. There's a couple things we didn't hit on that we might want to revisit this in a month or two, Steve. So
Sure.
with us has been, of course, David Barnett from the Sextant Group. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Where can people find you or the Sextant Group?
You can find us on our website, thesextantgroup.com. You can email me, dbarnett@thesextantgroup.com. And those are probably the two best ways.
All right. Also with us is Mr. Richard Fregosa from fregosadesign.com. Thank you, sir. Richard R. Fregosa.
R.
For people that listen to this podcast, so speak, brother.
You're using sign language.
Yes, I know. It's making for good radio. You can find me at fregosadesign.com. On the interwebs, you can type in my name. Sometimes stuff pops up, but probably the easiest way is follow me on Twitter at rfregosa.
And are you helping the folks at CE Pro for CES?
I will not be at CES, unfortunately, this year. I had an offer I couldn't refuse, and so I will be in some idyllic beach area on the East Coast during that, drinking a lot of coffee and not sleeping much.
Wow. Okay. Wait a minute. The beach in the East Coast, like Southeast Coast, in January.
Up here too.
Oh, never mind. Well, I know, but I'm thinking about being on a beach in, like, Maine.
I'm going to be in the Hamptons.
Oh, you're going to the Hamptons.
I'm going to be in the Hamptons in winter, which is like the worst possible
I was going to
time.
say, I mean, an offer you couldn't refuse. I'm not sure if I would qualify it quite, maybe you shouldn't refuse, but I don't know. Anyhow. All right. And last but not least, Steve Greenblatt from Control Concepts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You can reach my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net, and reach me on Twitter, LinkedIn, those types of things, at Steve Greenblatt. And little thing that we're doing is put together a community for technology managers. So any technology managers interested, check out techtalkav.com. We just put up a new website, and it's going to be a way for technology managers to interact, share experiences, knowledge, and so forth, and free for everybody to join.
Yep. And you and our buddy Mark Lovecchia just put up a new podcast for that. So check that out if you would, please.
Yeah, we're having a little fun with it. It's always good to talk with Mark. He's keeps me entertained.
I can see that. That's all I'm going to say. Don't follow me, because at this point in the season I'm grousing about the fact that the Bears have no direction whatsoever. But you can go by the website avnation.tv. avnation.tv. You will find this program and a host of others. It's Christmas time, and we partnered with our buddy High Five Phil Cordell to bring you a very interesting holiday video. Phil came up with an AV sweater song. Advanced AV and John Green and Chris Netto and a bunch of folks came up with this crazy idea about a month ago. A bunch of AV professionals posted on social media pictures of themselves in holiday sweaters. So couple that with Phil Cordell and his singing and rapping and holidays, and yeah, so check that out if you would, please. That's there, and got a bunch of stuff coming up the first part of next year, so just stay tuned to that. We've got a newsletter. Check that out if you haven't signed up for it. It's on the website there on the front page. So avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been A State of Control.